I'm going to talk about a little bit about FM radio here on one of my podcasting for this episode. So for those of you radiophiles, you're going to love this. For those of you out there, like I said, when I'm not podcasting also includes radio. So you might be interested by this. Maybe you listen to an FM radio station that might be in your neighborhood that is owned by Audacy, Audacy, and you might be interested in what they're doing. Now, in the UK and other European countries, or in other countries around the world, they actually have sometimes nationalized formats. Like you might have an NPR station. They'll have the same shows on everywhere. It's like a network. And what they'll do is, some stations used to have it where you would have a mix of, local programs mixed in with syndicated programs, and you would have a station that would run like that. Well, iHeartRadio's kind of done that a little bit. They tried to do that before and it failed, and they kind of changed it out. So like they have some morning shows that are fit in certain formats, and they'll just have other DJs that will come in and host shows on different stations. Well, that's what's happening coming up now with Audacy. Okay. They are restructuring all 16 of their mainstream CHR stations, contemporary hit radio. So top 40, pop radio. That's what they're talking about. So what happens is they're going to have several different people are going to be coming in to take over the format. So they're going to have national shows where they're going to have certain DJs that are going to be running at different times, and it'll be the same people in all these different markets. It's a very interesting way. It's a nationalization of radio. So like, for instance, the Capital Radio over in the UK or BBC Radio, they might have some local shows in between with what they're doing, but for the most part, they're all listening to the same DJs playing the same songs. Now, I don't know if the same songs are going to be played, but I'm guessing that's what they're going to do here with these stations. I don't know. They haven't said anything about that yet. So Audacy's implementing a regionalized CHR programming leadership model under the direction of format captain Brian Kelly, serving as the company's VP programming based at KISS 103.7 in Milwaukee, WXSS. And he'll be supported by a team of regional vice presidents of programming and regional brand managers. So what they're going to be doing is they're going to be having two of their major hosts that are on major stations in Chicago and Los Angeles. They'll be hosting their particular shows, not only on their local stations, but they'll also be heard on all the other stations among the Audacy Radio ownership of hit music stations. So one of them is going to be B96 WBBM Chicago afternoon personality Julia Lapidi, which will go by Julia. She runs middays here at Chicago's B96, which has been a legendary heritage top 40 station for over 40 years. She'll be now in middays across 15 of the company's stations. And Josh Brubaker, who's an afternoon host at KNOW Los Angeles, running the new 97.1 now, which has replaced the AMP 97.1 station that they had, going up against KISS FM, the perennial FM pop music station in the market for also 40 years plus. So he'll be covering the day part on several additional signals and also working nights on 7 others. So Jeff Solotano, who's Executive Vice President of Programming, says, "We're fortunate to having 2 rising stars here. We believe each of them has the ability to connect with the current and next generation of top 40 listeners." The idea is that we're not even going to bother creating stations where they're going to have an individual identity, or they're going to have an identity that matches the city that they're broadcasting from. It doesn't matter anymore. That's what they're basically saying. But that's, in some cases, you can have local programs and other stations, and that's okay too. So here's what's going on. Julia will be heard 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. local time on all the stations that are in the ownership. And Brubaker already is the self-proclaimed CEO of Radio TikTok. He has 3.3 million followers. He regularly weaves content from the platform into his Los Angeles Drive Time program, which he's been hosting since March. And Julia is a Detroit native who started with the company as a part-timer in the promotions department and joined B96 for nights in January 2019 and hosted mornings of the company's former AMP Radio 98.7 WDZH in Detroit. So they both have pretty significant backgrounds when it comes to radio. They've been in big market radio for a while, and they're young and they're new, fresh voices. That's the idea of what they're trying to say right here. So trying to bring in personalities, instead of trying to go and insert personalities that fit for a younger audience, They're just shutting that off. They're saying, you know what? We'll just get the audience to go and work with these certain jocks and try to just work it that way and see what happens. And, again, you're taking a lot of jocks' jobs out because of this. We already learned that the number of people were let go as a result, which is unfortunate. But also, here's what I also thought was going to happen too. A nationalization of radio, if you will. In addition, now these changes are coming up Monday, July 19th. So all these changes will be in effect by the time you listen to this episode. But in addition to the on-air changes, we're learning about this too. Audacy is creating a new national imaging and creative production team, which will elevate their sound execution for imaging, production, and contesting across their top 40 footprint. So the idea would be identify some of their best creators in various areas of their expertise, give them the opportunity to do more to improve our creative output. So we already know that we have all these people that are going to be coming in. Now, one of the stations that's going to be affected with what I'm listening to is Power 96. WPOW here in Miami, which is one of the stations I'm going to have to listen to, see how they do with this new format. I'm actually kind of interested. I might actually just check them out next week just to see what they're going to do. But there are changes to that format on that station as they're going to have a local morning show, which is fine. They've always had local, but now it's not like that anymore. The idea will be now that Power 96 will have on air their morning show, which will be some established talent that's been there for a long time. DJ Zog and Ivy, which has been there for many years, those two on that station. Julia, we just mentioned from B96, will be hosting middays. Their program director at Power 96, Miho, will be running 3 to 7 p.m. And then Brew runs at night. And that's the plan. So they got to set up with their audience. We'll see how they do in terms of their show and their playlist and how everything kind of works out. And also, the control of what the music's going to be at some point. We also want to find out how that's going to look as well. I'm actually kind of curious about that. So we'll see what they kind of do with all that and see what their plan is overall. I'm curious as to what they're going to do. Now, they're going to continue to deploy research, airplay, and streaming data to program music in each of the individual markets. And no plans are being made to change mornings at the roster of pop formatted stations. So they want to keep local talent in the morning, which is where they're going to have their biggest audience most part. The timing of the change coincides with what Audacy believes is a once-in-a-generation moment in the top 40 format to serve the next generation of listeners as the country rebounds from the pandemic. So we already know that SiriusXM is kind of fit as a national format to listen to top 40 music or whatever music you want. And, some people are already used to knowing that they have, not going to have that local morning show with a local feel because there's not much you could do locally anyway. And so some of these hosts that might not be a little bit inferior to these other hosts, they're going to be doing some of the same kind of content, right? They're going to basically be doing, the same kind of material, the same kind of prep, the same kind of gossip or sleaze or whatever it might be, and they'll just do that. And remember, not going to be doing anything where they're going to be overly interactive unless you're doing it through TikTok or Instagram or doing like a Facebook Live or whatever they might be. Will other stations do the same thing? Would iHeartRadio go back to the same idea, which you've kind of done, but Audacy really doing something that's more of a nationalized format? I'm curious to how it works. Now, ultimately, this takes away jobs. And ultimately, the creativity of radio continues to dwindle down even more. But we already know radio is going to get to that point because streaming has already destroyed it. So radio has to fit a different void. So can it nationalize itself, work the same way that BBC Radio does, effectively, because it does, and be much more in tune to what's going on? Is that what Audacy is going to do? Will they actually move their formats up and actually then start playing music which actually is in tap with what's going on virally? Now, the fact that they have one of their hosts that's very TikTok friendly, these programmers need to realize they need to follow what's going on with with streaming on all the different platforms when it comes to Spotify and Pandora and Apple and all. They need to keep an eye on that. Shazam, if you want to do that too. You have to keep an eye on that. Alternative Country, they mentioned how they were doing the same idea with this structure, working more cohesively as a unit. So if they're doing that, that's fine. But then also keep in mind that as they're putting these stations together, you also have to keep the idea that they need to stay on track with the times and the music. If they're not going to do it individually and not one station can do it, then let's see if they do it as a collective. And if they're running these formats where they're doing it with big market talent, they need to make sure to run these stations with a big market feel. So the music's coming out there. It's nationally wide out there, open. And then you also, when a new album comes out, new music comes out, it becomes viral, then let these jocks come in and start doing something. And then these hosts of these other local shows will come into form. The idea is, now, what still is going to be good is these hosts are going to take over middays and nighttime. So they're taking some formats that are going to be pretty solid. It's not a bad thing. Like, you're not taking over afternoon drive and mornings. That's the money makers for the local stations. They need to keep that open for them, keep it live and local. So that idea is not bad. Plus, the other thing, too, is that the plan is these hosts are going to be doing it live, it sounds like. So they're not going to be taped. They're not going to be voice tracked, which actually might not be a bad thing. So I'm curious as to how it works. I want to see it happen. Let's see, how the soup is made and see if it works out. So I'll keep an open mind. And until next time, I'll talk to you for another episode of What About Podcasting. Remember, follow me on YouTube. Subscribe there if you haven't done so. And listen every Monday, Wednesday, Friday for another episode. I'll talk to you next time.